Good evening. We'll come here at the last chapter in the book of Genesis, chapter 50, and we're going to talk about the last patriarch, Joseph. And this book about theme here is forgiveness. And we're going to continue here in verse 1. It says, "And Joseph fell upon his face, in his father's face, and wept upon him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel." Now, this is a continuation of the blessings. After the blessings in Genesis chapter 49, Israel died. And here you see that Joseph now is the last patriarch here, and he's now, in charge of the whole thing, because the blessings is being passed down from Jacob to Joseph. And here Joseph mourns for his father, because this man loved his father, and he commanded to embalm him. And here it's a physical way of mummification, to place myrrh on people, and then with the linen cloth to embalm, to prepare for burial. And those embalm are mostly Egyptians. And here it says in verse 3, it says, "And 40 days were fulfilled for him, for so are fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed. And Egyptians mourn for him 80 days." Now here you have 40 days of mourning that is taking place here in Egypt. And it says in verse 4, it says, "And when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spake unto the house of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Lo, I die in my grave which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan. There thou shalt bury me. Now therefore let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I'll come again." And Joseph asked Pharaoh's people to ask Pharaoh for permission to bury his father, and to bury him in Canaan, of course, because this is the oath that Jacob placed on his son to do, to take him. And meanwhile, Joseph here is explaining his deep concern to Pharaoh about the oath that he took with his father. And as also the oath as stated in Genesis chapter 47 verse 29, it says, "And the time drew nigh that Israel must die. Now Israel called Joseph his son, and then he said, Put your hand underneath my thigh," which is like a way of swearing an oath, the custom, just like putting someone's hand on top of their head. And then he says, "Sworn oath, and to bury me in Canaan, in where my fathers are, Abraham and Isaac." Now Joseph is bound by this oath. You see, he's bound by these oaths, and it's important to realize that an oath is a very serious thing in those days, and almost like a contract today. And in verse 6 it says, "And Pharaoh said, Go up and bury thy father according to as he made you swear." And you see Pharaoh now agrees here, and it says that go as according to as he made you swear. And Pharaoh now honors Joseph's request. And he says in verse 7, "And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt." And notice, sensing the importance of Joseph in Egypt here. And here you see the servants of Pharaoh, and you see the servants the elders of Pharaoh's house and important members of Pharaoh's household, all the elders and all the counselors in Egypt. And Joseph, in Joseph's latter years, he became very influential. And these men are now gathering to pay respect to his father Jacob. And again, the Egyptians respected and honored Joseph and to bury him, his father, in this manner. And on the contrary, there's going to be years down the line a Pharaoh that's going to rise up that does not know what Joseph has done for the Egyptians. You see, so sometimes when we neglect history, we don't know what happened, and we forgot to pay respect to those who did great things. And that's what this Pharaoh is going to do. He's going to neglect everything Joseph has done. But here you see these people are paying homage and respect to Joseph, and because he saved their life, he saved their dignity. And this is why these people are paying so much respect to him. And then it says in verse 8, it says, and all the house of Joseph and his brethren and his father's house, only their little ones and their flocks and their herds, there left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a great company. And here you see the house of Joseph, his brothers, and Jacob's house, and with attention to the chariots and the horsemen. You see, these were riders used as royalty, and these were for important and prominent people of Egypt. And he says that this was a great company. Again, in the event that is like a parade, it's like a parade kind of event. And also, he said that the younger children of Israel were left behind at Goshen, because it signifies that they are coming back. And then in verse 10 it says, and they came to the threshing floor at Atad, which is beyond Jordan. And there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. Now, continuing mourning is different from the previous in Egypt. The previous 40 days they mourned. This is like a continuing mourning and a lamentation on the threshing floor of Atad. And this is for 7 days. And again, this was an extension of mourning. This is an extension of mourning by usually professional mourners, and called the meteorologists. You see, these people are used originally in Egypt and also in the Far Eastern cultures for extension of mourning. For mourning throughout. It's an extension period of mourning. They will use meteorologists to mourn, and they will pay them. And these are the people that were coming here. And this is also this is an Egyptian culture. It says in verse 11, it says, and when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, this is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians. Wherefore the name of it was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. See, this is Abel Mizraim. This says the inhabitants, they heard this commotion, and this was quite a grievous mourning. This was a lot of cry going on, and this can be heard by miles by the Canaanites. And again, these meteorologists can be heard for miles. These were screaming people, they were crying and weeping. It was a grievous cry that prompted the Canaanites to call the place Abel Mizraim. See, and that means it's a meadow of Egypt. Again, this was an Egyptian culture that came in Canaanites, and they can see how these people value the dead, and the cries they were crying. And to point out that this was again, it's an Egyptian culture used to extend the periods of the mourning periods. And moving on, it says in verse 12, it says, and his sons did unto him according as he commanded them. Now, these are the 12 tribes, 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 children of, um, the 12 sons of Jacob. It says, for his sons carried him into the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field of a possession of a burying place of Ephron the Hittite before Mamre. Now, furthermore, Jacob's sons, they did as their father commanded them, and they carried him to the land of Canaan. And in the land of Canaan, they took him to this place called the cave of Machpelah, where their fathers lay down, which is Abraham and Isaac had, passed on, and they lay in that tomb. And these were at Mamre. This is where the burial place of Jacob is going to be. And then in verse 14 it says, and Joseph returned into Egypt, he and his brethren, and all that went up with him to bury his father, after he had buried his father. Now they returned back. Joseph returned to Egypt with his brethren, and this was after they have buried their father. And here in verse 15 it says, and when Joseph's brothers saw that their father is dead, they said, Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us all that the evil which we did to him. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, thy father did command before dying, saying. Now, unlike before, when their father was alive, they felt a bit secure, and now they're saying, now what will happen, what's going to happen next. And when their father Jacob now is dead, and it is now in question what's going to happen. Their security blanket is no more, and the brothers were feeling a bit unstable here and filled with guilty and fearfulness here, and then of the past and also the future. They don't know what's going to transpire. They are worrisome for the future. So they send a message to Joseph, and the message of forgiveness here is going to be seen, and see, what's going to happen now, and what's going to happen when my father is dead, what's going to happen. So here they send a message to Joseph for forgiveness, what my father has written. And here he sees in verse 17, it says, so shall ye say unto Joseph, forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sin, for they did unto thee evil. And now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spake unto him. Now this is a message of forgiveness about, what has happened to Joseph, what their brothers have did to him, and this is a forgiveness of Jacob, and also asking his son Joseph to forgive. Again, furthermore, the truth is also revealed by what they did, to Joseph by Jacob. And then they did evil. It says evil is not excusing the atrocious deeds here, and evil is to be called out before, again, but also forgiven. It says, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when he read the message, you see. And this is a powerful message. And Joseph never told his father what happened, but Jacob found out. And now he says, forgive, he pleased his son to forgive them. Forgive your brothers for the evil they did to you. And again, in verse 18, it says, and his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and they said, behold, we be thy servants. And Joseph said unto them, fear not, for am I in the place of God? You see, the brethren now came before they sent the messenger. Now they came and they fell before his face, and they said, we be your servants. And Joseph said, fear not, I am not in the place of God. See, am I in the place of God? And Joseph had awareness and respect for God, and gives, him, humility. He has humility also. In verse 20, it says, but as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much alive. He says, but as for you, he's not excusing the atrocity. He says, as for you, you meant it for evil. But God, you see, thought it for good. And God is purposeful. Joseph is also purposeful. And, it said God meant it for good. You see, good is what God does. And again, it says to save much lives. You see, God is the one that overruled evil. God can either allow evil or he can overrule it. And at times, God will let evil run its course. But sometimes, he will prevent it. But evil is done unto Joseph, and this evil was for the purpose of good. Again, Joseph here is an example of Christ. Evil was done to Christ for the purpose of good, see, to save lost sinners. And this was, quite a parallel between Christ and Joseph here. And it says, but as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. See, this is a parallel. Christ is also crucified on the cross. Evil was done to him to save sinners. He says, but now therefore, continuing on in verse 21, now therefore fear not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. Again, Joseph said, he repaid them back with goodness. And evil can always be repaid back with goodness, and not evil for evil. You see, we're not to show evil for evil. It's to be repaid back with goodness. And he says, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly to them. You see, he did not have any animosity towards them. And this was complete forgiveness. And this is the right forgiveness, to forgive and forget. And he doesn't have any animosity towards them. And it says in verse 22, and Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house. And Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation, and the children also, Machpelah, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knees. Now Joseph dwelt in Egypt, and he and his father's house, and then he lived for 110 years. Again, you see how in the beginning man used to live over almost 1,000 years, but here you see how because of sin man now lives 110 years. And Joseph we're ending this chapter by Joseph's lifespan that is shorter for 110 years. Again, you see the shortest lifespan here. And but he saw Ephraim. This man lived a fruitful life. He saw Ephraim's children of the third generation, and the children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knees. And then in verse 24, it says, "And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." And he says that Joseph, he said to his brethren, and these are Israelites now. He's speaking to a nation now, which, came by one individual, Abraham. And now they are turned into multitudes now. These are the children of Israel that are in Egypt. It says he comforted them. He says, now before I die, God will surely visit you. And he says, you will bring you to the land he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now this is the promise. This is the promise that they are going to take for 400 years now. Over 400 years, although they are out of the land of Canaan, but now they are in Egypt holding on to this promise. And Joseph, he says in verse 25, and Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and he shall carry up my bones from hence. Just like his father's oath, he took an oath of the children of Israel now. And this is oath that is bound. Again, he told the Israelites that God will surely visit you. And this is a prophecy of Joseph, and it literally was fulfilled in the time of Moses. And to say, to carry my bones out of Egypt and back to the land. It's interesting. Joseph, he yearned to go back to the land of Canaan, but he never did. When he was a young man, he was trying to get out of prison to go back to the land of Canaan. And he never did, but his bones is going to stay for over 400 years now. And he says that the prophecy is that you are to bury my bones in Canaan. And again, it took a long time, but eventually it was fulfilled. In verse 26, it says, so Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. You see, they embalmed him, and this is an Egyptian burial. They embalmed him and put him in a coffin in Egypt. And he died, it says, for 110 years he lived. And he was put in a coffin. So, precious saints, we have finished the entire book of Genesis. And I'm so, pleased with you following me throughout this journey. And we are going to, the next book we are going to go to is the book of Matthew. We're going to go back to the Old New Testament. And until then, precious saints, God bless.